More than 40 years have passed since Family Ties first aired, and the people who brought the Keaton family to life went through addiction, heartbreak, reinvention, and quiet triumph that nobody watching in 1982 could have predicted. One of them built the most powerful advocacy machine in the history of American medicine out of a diagnosis he hid for 7 years. Another was arrested again and again in the same small Colorado town, mugshot after mugshot, until something finally changed. A third became one of the most quietly respected character actresses in Hollywood, only after a life-shattering revelation about her own marriage that took her 20 years to speak aloud. When Family Ties premiered on September 22, 1982, standing at the edge of the Keaton living room was an awkward, love-struck teenager the whole country would come to adore. Skippy Handelman, the neighbor boy hopelessly infatuated with Mallory Keaton. That was Marc Price. He was only 14 years old when the show began, and the character almost didn't exist at all. Skippy wasn't originally written as a long-term role, and it took nearly 2 full seasons before producers realized audiences couldn't get enough of his awkward charm. Marc Price was born on February 23, 1968, into a household already soaked in show business. His father was Al Burney, a hard-working Borscht Belt stand-up comedian who spent decades polishing his timing in the resorts of the Catskills, and his mother, Joy Mann, was a singer. Marc was practically raised backstage. By the time most children were learning to ride bicycles, he was already picking up guest spots on Archie Bunker's Place and One Day at a Time. When Family Ties cast its pilot, nobody could have guessed that the gawky kid playing the neighbor would become one of the most quoted characters of the decade. While still filming Family Ties, Price began branching into film, landing the starring role of Eddie Ragman Weinbauer in the 1986 cult horror favorite Trick or Treat. Working alongside rock icons Gene Simmons and Ozzy Osbourne, he followed it with the 1988 action film The Rescue opposite Kevin Dillon. After the sitcom ended in 1989, Price pivoted almost entirely away from acting and toward hosting and production, fronting the Disney Channel game show Teen Win, Lose or Draw from 1989 to 1992. He then spent years building a substantial behind-the-camera career, executive producing dozens of episodes of National Lampoon's Funny Money for GSN and creating a Showtime comedy special, Time to Earth Day. What fewer people know is that Price quietly built a second career as a touring stand-up comedian, opening for names like Jay Leno and Jerry Seinfeld, and holding a residency at Harrah's in Las Vegas for more than 15 years. Decades after the show wrapped, he still leans on his Hollywood childhood as material. Joking on podcasts about growing up the son of a Catskills comic, he has also used his platform for a cause close to home. While touring the country doing stand-up, Price regularly raises money for the Michael J. Fox Foundation, honoring the on-screen chemistry he shared with the co-star who went on to define an entirely different kind of fame. Today, in 2026, Marc Price is 58 years old. He still tours clubs across the United States, still books small independent film roles, and still, whenever fans shout "Skippy" across a parking lot, answers with the same easy grin that made America fall for the character in the first place. He was the leather-jacketed, borderline illiterate artist boyfriend who drove Steven and Elyse Keaton to distraction and drove ratings through the roof. Nick Moore arrived in the 4th season of Family Ties as Mallory's on-again, off-again love interest, and Scott Valentine turned what could have been a one-note joke into one of the show's most beloved supporting characters. He was 27 years old when he joined the cast in 1985, but almost nobody watching realized how close Valentine had come to never acting again at all. Scott Eugene Valentine was born on June 3, 1958, in Saratoga Springs, New York. He didn't set his sights on acting until partway through college when he enrolled at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City and completed the demanding 3-year program in just 18 months. He picked up a handful of off-Broadway roles and even signed a contract for a daytime soap. Then, on September 17, 1981, everything nearly ended before it began. Valentine was struck by a truck, run over, and dragged along the pavement. The accident sidelined his career for 3 full years while he recovered from injuries that would have permanently ended most people's ambitions. When he finally moved to Los Angeles, still rebuilding his strength, he landed the role of Nick Moore almost immediately. The character was such a hit that NBC tried, not once but 3 separate times, to spin Nick off into his own series. The first attempt, Taking It Home, paired Valentine with veteran actor Herschel Bernardi and was scrapped entirely after Bernardi's sudden death in 1986. A second concept, imagining Nick working at a juvenile detention center in a Friends-style ensemble, never made it past the script stage. The third, The Art of Being Nick, actually aired as a single pilot episode in August of 1987, co-starring a young Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and came in second place in the ratings for its time slot. It was never picked up. After Family Ties ended, Valentine kept working steadily in guest roles across shows like CSI NY, News Radio, and JAG, along with a string of made-for-television and direct-to-video films. He married actress Kim Denise Fisher-Stevenson in 1985, during the height of his Family Ties fame. In the decades since, he has largely stepped away from the spotlight, occasionally resurfacing for interviews reflecting on the accident that almost defined his life before the sitcom ever gave him the chance to have one. Today, in 2026, Scott Valentine is 68 years old. The man who nearly lost everything to a truck on a New York street ended up becoming, however briefly, one of the most recognizable faces of 1980s network television. He was the baby of the Keaton family, the toddler who grew up on camera in front of an entire nation. And by the time he reached adulthood, his name was appearing in police blotters instead of TV listings. Brian Bonsall took over the role of Andy Keaton in the show's 5th season in 1986, replacing twin infant actors Garrett and Tyler Merriman, who had originated the character. He was just 5 years old when he stepped into the role, one of the youngest actors ever to join a hit primetime sitcom as a continuing cast member. Bonsall appeared in 75 episodes of Family Ties through the series finale in 1989, growing from a toddler into a young boy on national television. He didn't retire from acting immediately afterward. In fact, his most unexpected credit came a few years later, when he was cast as Alexander Rozhenko, the son of Worf, in 7 episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation, giving an entire generation of science fiction fans their own separate memory of him, entirely apart from the Keaton household. He also appeared in the films Fatherhood and Blank Check during the same period. But Bonsall walked away from Hollywood before he ever reached high school, moving back to Colorado and graduating in 2000 like any other teenager. What followed was a genuinely difficult stretch. In 2007, Bonsall was arrested and charged with second-degree assault and false imprisonment after his girlfriend told police he had poured an alcoholic drink over her face while she slept, placed her in a chokehold, and thrown her down when she tried to leave. He was sentenced to probation, which required him to attend domestic violence courses and submit to daily breathalyzer tests. He did not comply, and in 2009, a warrant was issued after he missed a scheduled court hearing. Then, in December of that year, police say Bonsall got into a fight at a Boulder apartment and struck a friend in the head with a broken wooden stool, an incident serious enough to bring a second-degree assault charge that could have carried up to 6 years in prison. Cuffed and led out of a Boulder courtroom in early 2010 after violating the terms of his release by testing positive for marijuana, Bonsall's mugshot ran in newspapers across the country, a jarring image next to the freckled child actor most Americans remembered. That 2010 arrest turned out to be his last. In the years since, Bonsall has worked steadily to rebuild his life, channeling his energy into music. He formed his first band in 1998 and, starting in 2011, pursued it seriously, joining punk and pop-punk projects around the Denver area, releasing original material on SoundCloud, and eventually fronting a band called Low Job for several years. In a 2016 interview, he acknowledged his past mistakes candidly, describing what he'd learned about himself since putting his drinking-related legal troubles behind him. Today, in 2026, Brian Bonsall is 45 years old. The toddler who grew up as America's television baby brother spent a decade fighting very real demons in full public view, and, unlike so many child stars whose stories end in tragedy, appears to have found his way through to the other side. She was the youngest Keaton daughter, the tomboy who cared more about sports than boys, and hewed closer to her hippie parents' politics than her siblings ever did. Tina Yothers was only 9 years old when Family Ties premiered in the fall of 1982, already a seasoned professional who had been appearing in television commercials since the age of 3. Few child actors of her era managed the transition to adulthood with as little public wreckage, but her path away from Hollywood was almost as unusual as the fame that preceded it. Christina Louise Yothers was born on May 5, 1973, in Whittier, California, the daughter of television producer Robert Yothers, and the only daughter among 4 children. Her 3 brothers all worked in commercials as well. She made her screen debut in 1981's The Cherokee Trail before landing the role that would define her childhood a year later. Across all 172 episodes of Family Ties, Yothers grew from a small girl into a teenager in real time in front of the camera, earning a Young Artist Award along the way. While still a young teen on the show, she briefly pursued a recording career, releasing 2 singles as a 13-year-old and performing a live opening set for Menudo during the show's summer hiatus. After Family Ties ended in 1989, Yothers deliberately stepped back from the kind of career trajectory many expected. She played a fictionalized version of figure skater Tonya Harding in the 1994 satirical short Spunk, made scattered guest appearances, including a memorable one on Married Moas with Children, and later resurfaced in reality television, appearing on Celebrity Fit Club, Celebrity Wife Swap, and DC's What Not to Wear. But by her mid-20s, Yothers had largely walked away from the industry that raised her. In 2002, she married Robert Kaiser, an electrician, in a private ceremony that stayed almost entirely out of the tabloids, a striking contrast to the chaos so many of her former child star peers experienced in relationships. The couple settled in Ontario, California, roughly 35 miles east of Los Angeles, about as far from the Hollywood machine as one could get while still technically living in it. They welcomed daughter Lillian Grace in 2005 and son Robert Jake in 2007, blending their family with Robert's 2 children from a previous relationship. Yothers has spoken little publicly about the choice to disappear from the spotlight, but her quiet, deliberately ordinary life stands as one of the more genuinely peaceful outcomes among her former co-stars. Today, in 2026, Tina Yothers is 53 years old, living in the same Southern California town she has called home for more than 2 decades. Proof that not every child star's story has to end in either tragedy or a desperate scramble back into the limelight. Long before she became one of the most famous sitcom actresses on the planet, she was just another young performer trying to book a guest spot on a top-rated NBC show. Courteney Cox appeared in 20 episodes of Family Ties between 1987 and 1989 as Lauren Miller, Alex Keaton's college girlfriend, a role that, in hindsight, was clearly a launching pad for something far bigger. She was 23 years old when she joined the cast. Courteney Bass Cox was born on June 15, 1964, in Birmingham, Alabama, and began her career as a fashion model before pivoting to acting in the early 1980s. Her earliest major break came not on Family Ties, but a few years prior, when she appeared as the girl Bruce Springsteen pulls on stage from the audience in his 1984 music video for Dancing in the Dark, a piece of pop culture trivia that has followed her for 4 decades. By the time she landed the recurring role of Lauren on Family Ties, she was already building the kind of steady television resume that would soon make her one of the most bankable actresses of her generation. What happened next needs almost no introduction. In 1994, Cox was cast as Monica Geller on Friends, the NBC sitcom that would become one of the most successful and enduring shows in television history and turn her into a global star for the following decade. She followed it with the Scream horror franchise, playing tenacious reporter Gale Weathers across every installment from 1996 through the 2020s, and later starred in and produced the dramedy Cougar Town. She married actor David Arquette in 1999. The couple had 1 daughter, Coco, before divorcing in 2013, remaining notably amicable co-parents in the years that followed. Cox's personal life has continued to make headlines well into 2026. She spent more than a decade in a relationship with Snow Patrol musician Johnny McDade, becoming engaged in 2014 before calling it off the following year, then reconciling without formally re-engaging. In late June of 2026, people confirmed that Cox and McDade had split for good after more than 10 years together. A quiet, mutual ending to one of Hollywood's longer-running modern romances, arriving just as fans were still processing how far she had come since her brief run as a Keaton family girlfriend on a 1980s sitcom. Today, in 2026, Courteney Cox is 62 years old and remains one of the most recognizable actresses of her generation. Proof that sometimes the smallest credit on an early resume turns out to be the first page of an entirely different story. Of everyone who ever set foot on the Family Ties soundstage, no one's storyline reached further off camera than hers. Tracy Pollan joined the cast in its fourth season in 1985 as Ellen Reed, the love interest who finally gave Alex P. Keaton a real, grounded romance after years of comedic near misses. She was 25 years old when she took the role, and the on-screen chemistry she shared with her co-star turned out to be entirely real, just not on the schedule anyone expected. Tracy Jo Pollan was born on June 22, 1960, on Long Island, New York, to a Jewish family. Her father worked as a financial consultant and writer, and her mother was a magazine editor. She trained at the Herbert Berghof Studio and the Lee Strasberg Institute before working her way through off-Broadway theater and a handful of television and film roles in the early 1980s, including a small part in 1983's Baby It's You. When she was cast opposite Michael J. Fox as Ellen Reed, the two spent an entire season playing a couple on screen, while both were, in real life, dating other people entirely. Pollan left the series after roughly a year to pursue other opportunities, and the two actors went their separate ways without so much as a date between them. Then, in 1987, fate intervened twice in the same room. Pollan and Fox were cast opposite each other again, this time in the film adaptation of Bright Lights, Big City. By then, both were single, and what had once been platonic on-set chemistry quickly became something else entirely. They married on July 16, 1988, at the West Mountain Inn in Arlington, Vermont, and have remained married for more than 3.5 decades since. An almost unheard-of outcome for a relationship that began as two actors pretending to be in love for a network sitcom. Pollan largely scaled back her own acting career to raise their 4 children. Son, Sam, and twin daughters Aquina and Skylar, followed years later by daughter Esme, though she continued occasional work, including a 2000 guest arc on Law and Order Special Victims Unit that earned her a Primetime Emmy nomination. Pollan's role in her husband's life extended far beyond marriage. She was by his side through his 1991 Parkinson's diagnosis, his years of private struggle before going public, and the very difficult stretch that followed, during which, by his own account, alcohol briefly became part of how he coped. It was Pollan, he has said, who pushed him toward therapy and a healthier path forward. In 2014, she co-authored a family cookbook with her mother and sisters, and in 2024, she watched her daughter Skylar marry her own longtime partner on Pollan's 64th birthday. Today, in 2026, Tracy Pollan is 66 years old. What began as 13 episodes of a supporting role on a hit sitcom became the foundation of one of the most enduring and least publicly turbulent marriages in modern Hollywood. She was the material girl of the Keaton household, obsessed with shopping, uninterested in schoolwork, endlessly exasperating to her overachieving older brother. Justine Bateman brought Mallory to life with a specific comic softness that made the character far more endearing than the script alone might have suggested. She was only 16 years old when Family Ties premiered in 1982, and the role earned her both Emmy and Golden Globe nominations before she was even old enough to vote. Justine Tanya Bateman was born on February 19, 1966, in Rye, New York, and moved to Los Angeles as a child alongside her younger brother Jason Bateman, who would go on to build a major career of his own. Justine's rise came quickly. After a handful of early television appearances, she landed the role of Mallory and stayed with the character for all 7 seasons and 172 episodes of the show's run, becoming one of the most recognizable teenage faces on American television throughout the mid-1980s. After Family Ties ended, Bateman continued acting steadily, appearing in projects including Men Behaving Badly, Desperate Housewives, Men in Trees, and the web series Easy to Assemble. and made a memorable cameo on Brother Jason's series Arrested Development in 2006. But over the following 2 decades, she quietly built an entirely second career. In her 40s, she enrolled at UCLA to study computer science and game design, graduating at age 50, a striking pivot for someone who had spent her entire childhood in front of a camera rather than behind a desk. In 2021, she made her feature directorial debut with Violet, starring Olivia Munn and Justin Theroux, officially completing her transformation from teen sitcom star to filmmaker. It is Bateman's writing, however, that has made her one of the more unexpectedly provocative voices to emerge from her generation of former child stars. In her books Fame, The Hijacking of Reality, and Face One Square Foot of Skin, she has written candidly and at length about discovering in her early 40s that the autocomplete result for her own name online read "looks old," and about the years-long process of dismantling the shame that discovery triggered in her. Rather than pursuing cosmetic procedures, Bateman has become one of Hollywood's most outspoken advocates for aging visibly and without apology, arguing publicly that the entire culture of fixing older faces is built on manufactured fear rather than genuine necessity. More recently, she has become an equally vocal critic of the entertainment industry's growing use of artificial intelligence, warning that it threatens to hollow out the creative professions she has spent her adult life building. On the personal side, Bateman married Marc in 2001, and the couple share 2 children. Today, in 2026, Justine Bateman is 60 years old, no longer the shopping-obsessed teenager America watched grow up, but a filmmaker, author, and one of the entertainment industry's more fearless commentators on the subjects of age, image, and technology. He was the gentle, endlessly patient father who somehow made a former Peace Corps hippie raising a young Republican son believable week after week for 7 years. Michael Gross brought a quiet warmth to Stephen Keaton that grounded the entire show's culture clash premise. He was 35 years old when Family Ties premiered, already an accomplished stage actor with an Obie Award to his name, and the gentle sitcom father he played would eventually give way to one of the most beloved cult movie characters of the following 4 decades. Michael Edward Gross was born on June 21, 1947, in Chicago, Illinois, the son of a telephone operator and a tool designer. He briefly ran with a gang during his teenage years before turning his focus toward academics, eventually becoming senior class president. He earned his undergraduate degree at the University of Illinois at Chicago and went on to complete a Master of Fine Arts at the Yale School of Drama. Before television ever called, Gross spent years in serious regional and off-Broadway theater, winning an Obie Award in 1982 for his work in No End of Blame, and making his Broadway debut playing a drag queen alongside Richard Gere in Bent. That same year, 1982, he was cast as Steven Keaton, the role that would define how millions of Americans first came to know him. The character sketch drawn during the show's opening title sequence was, in fact, hand-drawn by Gross himself, a small detail few viewers ever realized. After Family Ties ended, rather than being typecast as a soft-spoken sitcom, Dad Forever, Gross pulled off one of the more improbable reinventions in television history. In 1990, he was cast as Burt Gummer, the paranoid, heavily armed survivalist at the center of the monster movie franchise Tremors. The role could not have been further from Steven Keaton, and Gross leaned into it fully, becoming the only actor to appear in every single installment of the franchise across film and television, from the original 1990 film all the way through 2020's Tremors, Shrieker Island. Gross has continued working steadily in the decades since, balancing his acting career with a lesser-known personal passion for railroad preservation and historic trains. He has occasionally reunited on stage with his former Family Ties co-star, Meredith Baxter, performing together in productions of Love Letters and even starring together as a married couple in the 2012 Hallmark Channel holiday film, Naughty or Nice, a full-circle echo of the roles that first made them famous. Gross is married to Elsa Bergeron, with whom he shares 2 children. Today in 2026, Michael Gross is 79 years old, sharing the exact same birth date as his former on-screen wife. A coincidence the show's producers never planned for and audiences never noticed. Few actors manage to build two entirely separate legacies in two entirely different genres. Gross, gentle sitcom father turned gun-toting cult icon is one of the rare ones who did. She was the calm, competent architect at the center of the Keaton household, the former flower child who somehow held her family together through a decade of cultural upheaval on screen. Meredith Baxter brought Elyse Keaton a steadiness that anchored the entire ensemble. She was 35 years old when the show began in 1982, and behind that composed maternal television presence was a woman quietly enduring a marriage that would take her decades to describe honestly in public. Meredith Ann Baxter was born on June 21, 1947, in South Pasadena, California, the daughter of actress and producer Whitney Blake and radio announcer Tom Baxter. She had already built a substantial career before Family Ties ever began, starring in the CBS sitcom Bridget Loves Bernie and the acclaimed ABC drama Family, which earned her 2 Emmy nominations. In 1982, she was recommended for the role of Elyse Keaton, met with the show's producers, and stayed with the character for all 7 seasons of the show's run. Playing Rebecca, playing Elyse, was, in many ways, both Baxter's greatest professional achievement and a source of enormous personal strain. During the years she starred on Family Ties, Baxter was married to actor David Burney, a union she would later describe, in her 2011 memoir, Untied, as 15 years of emotional and physical abuse that she endured largely in silence. She has said she turned to alcohol during those years to manage the pain, eventually reaching a breaking point during a backstage rehearsal while Burney was working abroad. Baxter and Burney divorced in 1989, the same year Family Ties ended, and she has been sober ever since, more than 3.5 decades now. After the show, Baxter continued working steadily, taking on darker, more dramatically demanding roles than Elyse Keaton ever allowed, including an Emmy-nominated turn as convicted killer Betty Broderick in the 1992 television film A Woman Scorned. She also starred as a woman confronting a breast cancer diagnosis in the 1994 film My Breast, a role that, unbeknownst to her at the time, would foreshadow her own future. In 1999, at age 52, Baxter was diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer. She underwent 2 lumpectomies and made a full recovery, later founding a charitable skincare line to fund breast cancer research. In 2009, Baxter made headlines again, this time by publicly coming out as a lesbian on the Today Show, revealing she had been quietly dating her partner, contractor Nancy Locke, for several years. The two married in an intimate Los Angeles ceremony in December of 2013, surrounded by Baxter's 5 children from her previous marriages. Reflecting on her journey years later, Baxter has said she finally feels she is being honest for the first time in her life. Today in 2026, Meredith Baxter is 79 years old, married to Nancy Locke, cancer-free for more than 2 decades, and by all accounts, living the most peaceful chapter of a life that spent far too many years hidden behind a very convincing television smile. And finally, him. The ambitious, money-obsessed, Nixon-admiring teenager who somehow became one of the most beloved characters in American sitcom history, and whose real life would go on to accomplish something no scriptwriter could have invented. Michael J. Fox was more than the actor who played Alex P. Keaton. He became, over the following 4 decades, one of the most consequential medical advocates of his generation. He was 21 years old when Family Ties premiered in September of 1982, and he had absolutely no idea what the following 44 years would ask of him. Michael Andrew Fox was born on June 9, 1961, in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, the son of a Canadian Armed Forces member and a payroll clerk who occasionally acted herself. The family moved frequently during his childhood, before finally settling in Burnaby, British Columbia, when Michael was 10. He discovered acting through a junior high drama club, landed a role on the Canadian series Leo and Me as a teenager, and left school at 17 to try his luck in Los Angeles. His breakout came at 21, when he was cast as Alex Keaton, a character the show's creators originally intended as a minor supporting role, until Fox's performance made him the undeniable breakout star. He would go on to win 3 consecutive Primetime Emmy Awards for the part. While Fox was still riding the wave of Family Ties, he was simultaneously becoming one of the biggest movie stars in America, headlining Back to the Future and its sequels, Teen Wolf and The Secret of My Success. Then, in 1991, while filming Doc Hollywood, a 29-year-old Fox noticed a persistent tremor in his pinky finger. A neurologist delivered a diagnosis that would have devastated most careers before they'd even peaked. Early onset Parkinson's disease, a condition almost never seen at that age. Doctors reportedly told him he had roughly 10 good working years left. Fox kept the diagnosis private for 7 years, continuing to work, headlining the sitcom Spin City starting in 1996, while quietly managing worsening symptoms behind the scenes. In 1998, Fox went public. 2 years later, he founded the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research, an organization he has said was built simply to push scientific progress forward faster than it was naturally moving. It has since grown into the largest nonprofit funder of Parkinson's research on Earth, having raised more than $2.5 billion and helped fund more than 175 experimental treatments now in human trials, surpassing, in scale, even the United States government's own investment in the disease. In 2026 alone, the foundation helped drive a first-in-the-nation paraquat pesticide ban in Vermont, tied to elevated Parkinson's risk. And Fox personally wrote an op-ed supporting a major new California science funding initiative, arguing that the science is finally ready, and the only remaining question is how fast the world chooses to move. The disease has not been gentle with him. Fox has spoken candidly about spinal surgery for a benign tumor, multiple broken bones from falls, and the simple, grinding fact that daily life has become measurably harder with every passing year. And yet, he has kept returning to the work he loves. In 2026, he took a recurring guest role in the Apple TV Plus series Shrinking, playing a character living with Parkinson's opposite Harrison Ford's character, who is newly diagnosed with the same disease, using his own reality, once again, as a tool to help other people understand theirs. In October of 2025, he released his 5th book. In 2026, Canada promoted him to Companion of the Order of Canada, one of the nation's highest civilian honors. Fox married his Family Ties co-star Tracy Pollan in 1988, and the two have remained together for more than 37 years, raising 4 children. He has described his approach to the disease that changed his entire life in blunt, characteristically unsentimental terms. It is the biggest bully he has ever faced, and he intends to keep fighting it for as long as he can stand. Today, in 2026, Michael J. Fox is 65 years old. The young Republican teenager who once obsessed over money on a network sitcom spent the second half of his life redirecting an entire field of medical science toward a cure, and somewhere along the way, quietly became one of the most admired people in America. There it is, an entire world that existed just behind the cameras of Family Ties, Arrests and Reinventions. Marriage is built on real chemistry, and marriage is built on quiet suffering. A comedy about generational conflict that, off-screen, produced some of the most serious, complicated, and ultimately hopeful human stories in television history. But all of them are part of one story. A story about how 7 years in front of a camera can become more than 40 years of memory, about the enormous gap between the characters audiences thought they knew and the real people who went home once the studio lights went dark. Tell us in the comments, who was your favorite actor from this cast, and where in the world are you watching from today? If you want to keep finding the real stories behind the classic shows and the people who created them, subscribe to this channel and ring the bell. Every week, we go past the legend and into the life.